Hi, people. You see, I've got a dilemma, a difficult case on my hands, and I need your help sorting it out. If you got time, let me explain from the beginning. I'm not sure my digital footprint over the past 3 years has made it obvious, but I love anime. I know, it's cringe. Beyond my childhood years, which were consumed by SpongeBob, Chowder, the Backyardigans, Dora, can't forget her. I got bullied in the first grade for having a Dora backpack, so me and her have major beef. Beyond those years, anime has really been the only animation I've consumed. Western animation eventually felt hollow and played out as I grew older. As a 4-year-old, I was obsessed with Princess and the Frog and Tangled. I even had the Tangled Wii game. That's how much I effed with it. But as I started to develop my frontal lobe, I grew a disdain for Disney. Nickelodeon moved away from animation and into live action, and I never really consumed Cartoon Network outside of the occasional Gumball episode. I know it's a crime. Lock me up, officer. There was nothing left for me to enjoy in this space, and so I explored the unmarked territory of Japanese animation. My cousin introduced me to anime pretty young. I think the first one I watched was Naruto, if I'm not mistaken, followed by Rosary and the Vampire, which I definitely shouldn't have watched at the age of like 7. I didn't touch anime after that for a while. Around middle school though, I started to explore this world on my own. I was a huge My Hero fan, Todoroki's my boy. My friends and I watched Kakegurui, but I think one of the most first influential animes was Devilman Crybaby, a Science Saru Netflix produced masterpiece that stretched the boundaries of what an anime could look like. It was dark, gory, provocative, but also extremely philosophical, which I explored in my video essay, Anime is Political. It was the first animation I watched that immersed me into the world and gave me that sense of awe. It was breathtaking. A Silent Voice has been my favorite movie since the moment I laid eyes on it. It's one of the only pieces of media I've watched multiple times. I think I've watched it like 10 times probably, which is a lot for me. Okay, maybe for some of you, you're like, I've watched so-and-so 20 times. That's nothing. But girl, for me, it means a lot. I want to dedicate an entirely separate video to it because of how influential it was in my life. Not only perfectly illustrated empathy and my worldview, is the very reason I'm studying animation in college right now. It felt authentic and captured the complexity of being a human, not just through its message, but also through visual storytelling, something I had never seen animation do before. Watching anime like One Piece solidified my opinion that the Japanese animation industry was where I wanted to be. American animation has not improved since I fell out of love with it all those years ago. It's still lackluster and full of cash grabs. There's no innovation or boundaries being pushed outside of the occasional hybrid film like Arcane or Spider-Verse. And also learning about the wide use of 2D rigs didn't, improve my opinion at all. In contrast, anime has grown, and there's no better example of that than One Piece, a show that went from completely limited animation to some of the best in the industry. But even with the initial season's lack of budget, it always had a story, it always had depth. Oda wanted to center this kid who has the odds stacked against him and believes unflinchingly that he can fight against these unjustifiable hierarchies. It expertly weaves political messages of colonization, racism, and class politics into the story, adding a unique level of depth unseen even by other anime counterparts. The masterclass in character design, storytelling, like how is stuff in episode 40 relevant in episode 600? Like how did he keep track of all of this? I don't know. He is not human. Anime just makes you feel something. It feels alive and reflective of what people want out of entertainment right now. It's just better, and I think I can safely say a lot of the population agrees with my assessment. All signs show anime is more popular than ever. The genre penetrated the global market in the 90s with Sailor Moon, Pokemon, and Dragon Ball. Its influence has only grown further, with the industry doubling in size between 2002 and 2017. By 2019, it had become a $19 billion industry, and now 6 years later, it's worth around 21 billion. Companies have made major acquisitions in the space, with AT&T selling Crunchyroll to Sony in August of 2021 for 1.2 billion. That same year, Netflix reported that the number of households that watched anime on its streaming service increased by half the previous year. In layman's terms, anime is poppin', but there's a huge flaw beneath the mountain of profits. The people who create these global successes don't see any of that money. Several publications have reported that animators in Japan are practically living in poverty. Beyond this, they are subject to horrible working conditions, with animators being severely overworked to reach deadlines. At times, this can result in even hospitalization and obviously a severe decline in mental health. This is an issue that stretches beyond the animation industry too. Work in Japan is infamously grueling and doesn't pay well. In fact, let's refer to my handy dandy board over here that I spent time making just for this case. I got never mind this, it's a little, I spilled my paint a little bit, never mind that. Let's look over here. Have you ever seen a picture like this on the internet? It's a salaryman passed out on the streets of Tokyo. Now, while this is a testament to how clean and safe Japanese cities are, it's also a clear sign that these men are severely overworked. Salarymen end up often working 10 to 13 hours a day. The World Economic Forum reports 1 in 10 workers in Japan put in more than 80 hours of overtime. They even have a term for occupation-related death called karoshi, which 1 in 5 are at risk of. This could be a stroke, a heart attack, or even taking one's own life. So work in Japan in general is a horror show, which is not great news for me as someone who wants to work in the anime industry. But I found in the past that while research is great and everybody should definitely do more of it, please, I beg of you, it can sometimes flatten people's experiences or the whole story. So this time, I've not only extensively researched what it's like to be an animator in Japan, but I've also interviewed someone working in the industry. I want to know about unionization, isolation from work, and the future of this industry, all to determine whether I should actually do this with my life. This is the investigation of the anime industry. Before we go any further, I would like for you to subscribe. Okay, I put a lot of hard work and effort into everything I do. I don't know if you can tell. Yeah, it would be great if you could subscribe. I don't know if by the time this video comes out I've reached 7K. If not, then get on that. You know, I'm very close to 7K and I would like to reach it. The whole goal for the year is like 16K, girl. We're gonna see if that happens. I'm trying to stay positive. Also, I have TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, Discord. On Patreon, you can see how I make videos just like this from start to finish before anyone else does. Basically, you get to see the video before anyone else does. You get to see the idea, you get to see how I develop it, and you get to, you know, put a little bit of input into it. So if you want to do that, you know, I have the $5 tier, I got the $10 tier if you want the full experience, or you can just do $1 either there on Patreon or here on YouTube, where you get cute emotes. You can put them in the chat, girl, and a cute badge next to your name, although I do need to fix the badges, but one day I'll do that, surely. So I first want to grasp what it's like to work as an animator in Japan. I feel like there's definitely been this narrative circulating online that anime working conditions aren't the best. I honestly don't know how I originally came across this information, but somehow through the combination of memes and articles, it all resulted in this understanding that working in anime isn't very poggers. But is this data and collective online perception reflective of people's personal experiences, or is it somehow missing the mark? In 2021, New York Times followed Mr. Akutsu, a man who at the time had been an animator for around 8 years. Despite being top-line talent and an occasional director, his average take-home pay was only $1,400 to $3,800 a month. "I want to work in the anime industry for the rest of my life," Mr. Akutsu, 29, said during a telephone interview, but as he prepares to start a family, he feels intense financial pressure to leave. "I know it's impossible to get married and raise a child." From what I was reading, it's pretty customary to exit the field once you do start to settle down because of how hard it is to provide for yourself. There's a similar phenomenon happening in the US. There used to be this thing called... oh god. Frick. That was a bit too aggressive, but there used to be this thing called the American Dream, like a long time ago. It was this vision of owning a beautiful house with a white picket fence and being able to put your 3 beautiful children into college and still retire whenever you're 60, you know? Now, that dream is very dead. It's been dead for some time now, and it's only really alive to those who are financially well off. As the economy over the past few decades has stagnated and the government has refused to provide extra protections for its citizens, things like owning a home, starting a family, basic life milestones are practically unachievable for the middle class. This isn't just the case in America, but also in Europe, Korea, Japan, as I've covered in the past. I'll let you spot the economic similarities between those countries. And the Times reports Mr. Akutsu is one of the lucky ones. Thousands of animators do tons of work on productions and can sometimes get paid as little as $200 a month. How could anyone live off of such a wage? The animators getting these low wages are entry-level workers and dogaman, or what we call in-betweeners in the States. These people do... okay, it's pretty self-explanatory. They do the in-between drawings, in between the keyframes, which are the main drawings, to help relieve the workflow for the lead animator. Even lead animators, or what is called gengaman in Japan, get paid relatively low, especially in comparison to other countries. In 2019, the Japanese Animation Creators Association reported that the average animator in their 20s was only making around 1.1 million yen, or $10,000 a year, increasing by 1 million yen every decade of someone's career. And just for reference, the poverty line in Japan is 2.2 million yen. For contrast, the average animator in America makes around $65,000 to $75,000. Someone starting out probably makes as low as $40,000 or $50,000 if we're being generous, which is a $30,000 gap in pay when compared to Japan's average entry salary of $10,000. From my understanding, even the wages in US are down from what they used to be in the 90s. My professors have told me that they used to be like 100K a year back in the day. That's just what they told me. If they're wrong, it's their fault. Okay, it's a very hard thing for me to research, so I'm relying on them to be right. But like, they're supposed to teach me things, so like, if they're wrong, you know what I mean? Like, let's just go off of that information. So operating off of that truth, American companies are not infallible either. But like I said, anime has had an explosive growth over the past few decades, and rather than redistributing that wealth to their workers in the form of higher wages, companies have chosen to only widen the gap between the two. It's kind of a hard thing to research, but from what I've seen, the American animation industry is valued at around 23 billion USD. This will make it a comparable size to Japan's. So if the two bring in similar profits, the worker should be getting paid comparable wages, but they're not. Supposedly, this is due to an outdated system that keeps anime studios from seeing the profits they generate. Most of the money goes to production companies, which are made up of toy manufacturers, comic book publishers, and other corporations that help finance these projects. They pay animation studios a set fee and receive royalties for themselves. This was originally intended to protect studios from financial consequences, but it also keeps them and their employees from seeing these record profits. It all dates back to when the godfather of manga and creator of Astro Boy, Osamu Tezuka, was trying to translate his comics onto the big screen. His major obstacle, though, was the reluctance networks had towards airing animation. To make his dream a reality in the 60s, Tezuka massively undersold his show to get it on air. Basically, Tezuka and his company were going to take a loss for the actual show, said Michael Grendel, an assistant professor of Japanese studies at Leiden University. They planned to make up for the loss with Astro Boy toys and figures and merchandise, branded candy, but because that particular scenario worked for Tezuka and the broadcasters, it became the status quo. Rather than negotiate higher profit shares with these committees, studios have opted to tighten wages and benefits of their employees. Studios take advantage of the limitless pool of passionate anime lovers to cut down on cost. There are a lot of artists out there who are amazing, Simona Stanzani, a translator in the industry, said, adding that studios have a lot of cannon fodder. They have no reason to raise wages. Ingo Adachi, a character designer for Sword Art Online, added a slightly different perspective, claiming there's a shortage of skilled animators, so studios hire a large pool of passionate freelancers. Because of this, production costs in anime are infamously lower than in the United States. They don't have to provide benefits or a stable wage, meaning they can save money in the long run. It's a pretty gross practice, but over my nearly 2 years of watching One Piece, I've become familiar with some foreign animators who voluntarily work in this industry. That made me wonder, am I missing something? If it's this awful, why would people from different countries work in this industry? Surely there's something redeeming about it, right? So I emailed 3 animators, all coincidentally from France. I don't know what's up with Toei and French people, but cool. I emailed them to hopefully get an interview. Not really sure that any of them would actually answer. If you're in my Discord, I told you guys about this before anyone got back to me, and lo and behold, the most unexpected one of the 3 actually emailed me back and talked to me. And it was amazing and wonderful and possibly like the best day of my life. You know, no big deal. I'm gonna try not to glaze him too hard because I can already hear him cringing just at the implication of me doing such a thing. But real One Piece heads, okay, they know this man. His work is all over Twitter, TikTok, and was annoyingly the reason why I started watching the show. Vincent Chansard, or as he told me to call him, Vincent Fraudsard. He's funny as hell, dude. But I got to ask him about his first-hand experience as an animator in Japan and whether the rumors are true. I'm gonna need to see the comment section full of W Vincents in the chat right now. If you don't comment it, a 100-year curse on your family. So if you don't want that, and your firstborn child, I'll take them too. So if you don't want that, I suggest you comment W Vincents in the chat right now. Right now, I need to see it. But take it away past me. But thank you so much for taking your time out to talk with me. I really appreciate it. But obviously you are a lead animator, a storyboarder. And when I researched you, it said that you also direct. Is that true?
I did a bit of directing, yes, but mostly in Europe and America, if that makes sense, rather than Japan.
You've also worked on like some of the most popular animes, obviously One Piece and Mob Psycho and My Hero Academia and Jujutsu Kaisen. A lot of things. It's a very, well, you told me not to glaze you, but it's a very impressive resume.
Thank you. I mean, I'm very happy with what I was able to work on. But ultimately, you know, like the Japanese anime industry is rather small. So obviously, you know, when there is a big project, everyone kind of work on it. So I'm more my circumstances are more akin to luck than it is, actual, oh, I'm so good and that's why I worked on this famous project. No, it's just that there is a need for animators and I happen to be there.
Well, I wanted to talk to you today about what it's like to be an animator in Japan, because it's something I'm interested in doing. Yeah, I'm 1 year out from graduating, but the thing is, I've heard a lot from what I've read, and there's like memes online about it being not the best industry to work in. Like, there's a lot of talk about like the disparity in pay and being overworked. But obviously, you have chosen to do this voluntarily. You've worked in America and France, so like you don't have to work in Japan, but you choose to. So I feel like maybe there's something I'm missing.
No, 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 no. I think you are absolutely right. Like, when you read about like the history of Japan and its ties to, for example, the US, like it's very obvious where, like the industry standards, if I might say, comes from. Like this is kind of a capitalism dream, if that makes sense. Like work conditions are, depending on the place, sometimes very much not great at all. Like I would say, as far as animation industry comes, like Japan is definitely one of the harshest industry in the world. Again, when it comes to animation, for sure. France and US have their demerit, but in comparison, yeah, definitely Japan is the harshest for sure. Although, what I will say to kind of like counteract what I just said is that in Japan, what's crazy is the difference between like the lowest paid employee and the highest paid employee, if that makes sense. Because like what we call here Shinjin, which are like, new workers, if that makes sense, people who just graduated, people who just started working, they are usually the most in the worst situation, if that makes sense. Pay is very low when you start working. Most of the time you don't go directly into doing what I do, which is Gengar. Most of the time you go the Doga route, which is kind of an assistant of sort if you compare it to the American system. And this is like very, very, very poorly paid job. But in contrast to that, you have people who are more privileged, who have sometimes more experience, who have sometimes more luck. I am such people who are paid a very, very decent rate. Even in some case, and in my case, I am paid more than I was in France. I mean, of course, France also has amenities, which still makes it a bit better. But like in terms of like paid job, I myself am part of like the privileged class who are paid fairly decently well. But yes, in Japan, the harshest thing is that when you start, it's a nightmare. Most people stop or cannot continue. It is very, very, very difficult to be able to survive until you have, a significant enough name or enough experience to be asking for more money, if that makes sense.
I wanted to ask you, how did you start working in Japan?
So the way I went about it is that, as you may know, I went to a French animation school, and there it's not very often we students, we do animation on the side and we post it on at the time Tumblr, but our social network. Our school very much pushed us to have an online presence. And so at the time my drawing was very, very bad, so I did a lot of exercise animation with Japanese character, which are overall a bit more technical than Western designs. So I did that, posted it, and a specific director in Japan saw it and was like, hey, I want to work with that guy. So he reached out to me. I was like, dope, let me try it. And I did one cut for him. And after that, a different friend of mine who also went to Japan asked me to help them. And that's how I got 2 credits out. And basically what happened in Japan, because like there is a lack of animators, once a new name pop off in the credits, everyone contact them basically. So from there I just got more and more contact. And at some point I was like, you know what, let me go and directly live in Japan at this point.
There are reports from a New York Times article that I read that animators, kind of like you were saying earlier, they're like having to put off life milestones to like buying a house or starting a family. Do you like know, like, would you say this is accurate? Do you like know anyone who?
I mean, every topics needs, of course, nuance. I would say that there is people who live very well in the anime industry, but there are people who are like at slave level, who have like crazy work conditions, who literally cannot go home because like it costs money to take the train, if that makes sense. So they stay at the studio all the time because they don't go home, they can't wash. This is a real story, by the way. Like, this is literally one of my friends. Like, cannot go home because it costs money, so doesn't wash, so like starts smelling like crazy, sleep under their desk, can barely afford to eat. And it's like, if they don't do enough work, they don't get enough money to live in that condition. So it's absolutely, the thing I have seen are crazy. But at the same time, you know, like, some people can manage and some people live very well in this industry. So of course nuance is important, but I've never seen this level of poverty. Yeah, I've never seen this level of poverty in an animation industry, that's for sure. Like, I mean, I haven't seen that in France and I haven't seen that in America. That's for sure.
These horrid working conditions, as you can imagine, extend far beyond just pay. In Japan, there is a wider culture of devotion to one's work. In some aspects, it's quite beautiful, you know, instead of baggage handlers throwing your luggage around like they do in America, they carefully and beautifully place it on the cart. That's refreshing, you know, we can all appreciate that. But devotion should never cost your sanity, and for some animators, it's far past that line. Some animators speak with reverence about sleeping for days and sometimes weeks at the studio to complete a project. In a survey conducted by Nippon Anime and Film Culture Association, a nonprofit dedicated to improving Japanese working conditions, the median working hours for animators were 225 hours a month. Japan abides by the same 40-hour workweek regulations as we have in the US, meaning full-time, you are working about 160 hours a month. Anything above that is overtime, meaning the average animator in Japan is working 65 hours of overtime. Like, that is insane.
One of the main differences is that in America and France, you get paid for the month, for the day. Like, you just have to work like this amount of hours every day and you're good. In Japan, it's a amount of cut you do. So if like they tell you, oh, you have to do like these 20 cuts in 1 month, you have to get this done no matter what, which means some people don't sleep, some people don't eat. I mean, I'm sure you've read the things.
Yeah, I did read when I was reading the article that, like, kind of like you were just saying about your friend, that people like sleep at the studio to like get stuff done, which I thought was crazy.
Yeah, because it's like, if you think about it, if you don't get your cut done, you don't get money. You know, it's not about the amount of hours you work, it's about the amount of cut you get done. So like, to get the money, you have to get absolutely the cut done. And so, you know, like, people end up like spending a lot of hours. Again, because I know some of my colleagues are have been getting angry at people going like, oh, the conditions are so bad. Yes, there are people who live well, but let's be honest. Most people who start, most people who want to get into animating before they are able to get a decent pay go through like insanely bad work condition, if that makes sense. And that's if you manage to get to a good animation level, then you can get well paid. But again, some people are so overworked, they don't even have like the time to get better, if that makes sense. And even if you get better at actual drawing, speed is so important. And if you're someone who takes time, you're genuinely at such a disadvantage. It can be very, 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 very hard.
Henry Thurlow, an American animator who has worked in Japan, told BuzzFeed News he's been hospitalized multiple times due to exhaustion. Madhouse, a studio responsible for producing Death Note and Hunter x Hunter, was accused of violating labor code back in 2019. Employees were working 400 hours a month and went 37 consecutive days without time off. Back in 2014, a male animator working in Japan took his own life. His death was classified as a work-related incident after investigators found out he worked 600 hours that month. These are obviously the worst of the worst cases in this industry, and while this is not the average animator's experience, it does illustrate how far some studios are willing to go to complete projects. They're willing to risk losing their employees at the expense of profit. It really is a hyper-capitalist wet dream, as Vincent was saying. Freelance system not only allows companies to exploit workers in terms of pay, but it also helps curb labor regulations. Studios can subject these workers to the same grueling hours without having to pay them employee benefits or guarantee a salary. It's a very intentional exploitation of the loopholes within the system. Have you had a lot of experience with being overworked personally to like meet a deadline?
For sure. I think the craziest I did was like I did 3 all-nighters in a row. That was maybe the craziest it went.
Working these long hours creates a unique phenomenon within our modern society, in my assessment, of isolation. We spend most of our days at this place. In countries like America, it's tied to social amenities like our healthcare. I guess that's not really social at all. It's like the most privatized thing you can get. But instead of this being a right or something that you are entitled to within society through universal healthcare, people fear leaving their employment because they will lose these necessary benefits. Our work is also tied to our social circle. It's particularly the only place adults can actually make friends. Anything tangible in our life is designed around work. In theory, one would think the massive amounts of technological advancements over the past few decades would allow for people to work less while making more. This way, workers would have time to find third spaces or spaces outside of their home or their workplace where they can build relationships and community organically. This could be a coffee shop, a bar, a gym, a park. I don't know, anywhere outside of work or your home goes. Within reason, of course. Don't choose a Walmart parking lot, okay? Just go for something that's more like 90s sitcom vibe, refer to Friends, that's a perfect example. The idea is we would have more time for hobbies, for family, for ourselves, all in making at least the same amount of money. However, companies are incentivized under the capitalist structure to do the exact opposite, take away as many hours of the day from their workforce while keeping wages as low as possible. And as we've discovered in both Japan and America, there are very few enforcements and regulations that are in the interest of the working class. I mean, Trump is literally dismantling what little protections we do have by eroding the NLRB, or National Labor Relations Board, which has been protecting Americans for nearly a century at this point. In a lot of countries like South Korea, across Europe, and the US, the cost of living has increased nationally while wages have stayed stagnant. That's why more and more people in these countries are opting to be single, opting not to start a family, and the population is reducing rapidly. It's more beneficial to be alone, which is not a trend that will be valuable for anyone in the long run. So capitalism is teaching us all the wrong lessons. What a surprise. Are there any alternatives or ways, at least within the system, we can fight for better labor protections? There's gotta be a way. Do you know if there's unions in Japan?
So, are you familiar with Japanese post-World War II's history?
Kind of.
So I'm sure you've heard about, like the workers' movement that happened circa 47,
Yeah.
where, at first America was like, oh yeah, sure, go do it. And then, like they thought for 5 minutes and they were like, wait, isn't that kind of communism? And that's bad. We don't like that. And, they sent all the cops there. And so, like from that time, doing like kind of like big associative movement has become kind of hard in Japan. Not to mention Japanese people, and I literally had this discussion with one of my Japanese colleagues yesterday. Japanese people, it's very important for them to preserve harmony, if that makes sense. Like they call it heiwa. And talking about stuff like politics, talking about like this kind of subject where there can be, like, how should I say, kenka, arguments, kind of. Like my Japanese colleague told me they don't even talk about baseball because it could generate an argument. So it's like this kind of subject. It's not that they're taboo, it's more than they're avoided, if that makes sense. And of course, like I'm very lucky, I have colleagues that don't shy too much away from like this subject. Some of my younger colleagues are very much tapped in this subject, but it does take time to be able to bring forth this kind of discussion in Japan and in the workplace. And that's why I think I don't have the latest union rate in Japan. I'd be curious to research it, but I think the unionized percentage of workers is very low.
What Vincent is referring to is the Red Purge, an anti-communist campaign coordinated by both America and Japan in the late 40s and early 50s. Post-World War II, there was a huge labor movement in parties like the Japanese Socialist Party and the Japanese Communist Party, which we've talked about on this channel, rose to become real competitors in the Diet. The Japanese labor movement actually goes back to the Meiji period, or pre-World War I, in the late 19th century. But as you can imagine, if you know Japan's history, especially during World War II, that didn't last so long. They were fascist. If you didn't know, the country was run by fascists. Hopefully this is something we all briefly learned in school. But, NA education kind of sucks, so I'm here to remind you just in case, or educate you just in case. After World War II, this fascist regime was dismantled, and America established Japan as one of its neoliberal proxies in Asia. This established the country as a constitutional democracy, allowing the formation of different political parties. This labor movement was a new way for the country. But, nothing says democracy like stomping out a grassroots movement created by the people. Yeah, that's totally what democracy is. That's what I learned it is. The Red Purge eviscerated both the JSP and JCP, despite the former holding the most seats in the Diet. This allowed for the LDP, or the more conservative Liberal Democratic Party, to be formed and hold continuous power for the past 70 years. Thank you, USA. You are my best friend. Yeah. That's definitely democracy. Yeah, I did see something where Miyazaki from Studio Ghibli, he was when he worked at Toei whenever he was younger, he I think helped to unionize or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, but Toei is again a very rare case because they are so old, like of course they have this, but it's not a majority of studios, especially younger studios, don't have this. But yeah, Miyazaki was a big Marx reader when he was young, so like not very surprising. But again, this was kind of long ago, and things and mentality, from what again my Japanese colleagues have told me, have quite shifted in the post World War II era, if that makes sense.
Miyazaki worked at Toei, my goat, my love, fresh out of college, but he was miserable. I frankly didn't enjoy my job at all, Miyazaki later wrote. I felt ill at ease every day. I couldn't understand the works we were producing or even the proposals we were working on. Well, that's awkward. I guess my goat was washed in the 60s, but it's okay because they only serve cunt now. Please hire me after I graduate, Toei. I ride for you so hard. I beg of you, please. Let me escape from the hell that is America, please. As a new worker who felt hopeless in this new position, Miyazaki found refuge in the Toei Labor Union. The union was formed years before Miyazaki-san's arrival. It was formed after one of the studio's first feature films, Panda and the Magic Serpent. Animators could barely afford rent and sometimes had to pick up part-time work to survive. Back then, Toei would have what was coined as killer weeks, or grueling periods of unpaid overtime. It was understood that married staff and female employees would be allowed to leave on the last train. Single male employees worked through the nights. There was eventually a predictable price for such unremitting late nights. Irregular diets of junk food and cramped repetitive labor, which led to occasional but notable lapses of health among the staff. Toei's animators had enough and organized to demand better working conditions and pay. The first strikes began in the summer of '61 with a standoff between the company and the workers, but ultimately Toei folded and conceded to their demands. The foundation of an established labor union allowed for people like Miyazaki, although miserable, to have decent pay whenever they arrived at the company. Workers like him can now manage their hours and have a pay increase of about 8,000 yen. Average animators were paid 8,000 yen before the strike, which increased to roughly 19,000 afterwards. In 1964, Miyazaki became the union's general secretary, in turn becoming friends with the vice president Isao Takahata. Their politics were far to the left. Miyazaki was a Marxist with an affinity for Maoist China. While he later drifted away from Marx and Mao, he stayed strongly progressive. Takahata, for his part, was a Marxist for life. During the Vietnam War, Miyazaki said that he and his friends were rooting for the Viet Cong. So Vincent was not exaggerating whenever he said Miyazaki was a Marx reader. At all. Which only proves my thesis for anime is political. It really wasn't until learning about Miyazaki's past that I started to connect why a lot of famous mangakas are leftist. They were brought up in very close proximity to this massive labor movement and the popularity of left populism, which explains why Tezuka, Otomo, and everyone else I mentioned in that video are so progressive. I don't know why I had such trouble connecting those dots in the original video. I was like, are they a part of the JCP? That's the only way. Like, dude, they just were brought up in a time where people were really into progressivism. But now I get it, okay? I feel like my third eye has been opened. Eventually, both Takahata and Miyazaki left Toei and their union beginnings behind, although Miyazaki is still infamously an advocate for workers' rights. Her time and influence on Toei was profound, and seems like it set the company up to be one of the more cooperative ones within the country. In a broader sense, due to the widespread anti-communist propaganda, the word union is now foreign in Japan. These astronomically long sets of hours animators are subjected to violate Japanese labor regulations, but authorities have little interest in holding these companies accountable. In an interview, an official from Japan's labor ministry said the government was aware of the problem but had little recourse unless animators filed a complaint. and there have been complaints filed over the past few years. In 2022, 2 studios reached settlements with their employees for failing to pay overtime. But no government should sit idly by with their hands tucked behind them and say there's nothing we can really do. Politicians should be working toward better labor regulations that hold these studios accountable and protect all Japanese workers. If this is truly a democracy, as you say it is, you must serve in the interest of your people and not in the interest of capital. At the very least, is that too much to ask? In recent years, some of the larger studios have made efforts to change their labor practices for the better. These moves are motivated by the recent settlements and also pressure from the regulators and the public. Netflix has been pretty hands on deck in recent years, with anime being one of the main producers and distributors for some of the most popular titles like Dandadan and One Piece. Because of this, they are collaborating with Wit Studio, the studio creating the One Piece remake, to provide training for up-and-coming animators and financial support to those who join the program. Kyoto Animation, responsible for my favorite movie, A Silent Voice, which I mentioned earlier, has been ahead of the game in terms of labor regulations or labor practices. They prefer hiring salary-dependent employees instead of joining the freelance trend. Does it depend on the studio? Do you think some studios are better?
For sure. For sure, you're absolutely right on that. It's crazy, I forgot to mention it. Yes, absolutely. Depending on the studio, you can be very well off, or you can be, not well off. Because, of course, we've talked about, work condition. Of course, we've talked about money, but I'm sure you understand that workspace, the worst things that can happen in companies, is not just having bad pay and bad work condition, as I'm sure you understood.
Jun Sugawara, animator and activist, started a nonprofit new anime making system project to provide affordable housing to young illustrators. He began this advocacy in 2011, campaigning on animators' behalf. As workers in the industry leave for better pay, he's of the mindset that the anime industry may collapse someday. I, for one, don't think that will be the case. I think anime will always have a place in society, especially since people from all around the world are so passionate about it. For better or for worse, people will flock to this industry. A lot of people just felt there was value in being able to work on anime that they loved, Mr. Hirakimoto said. No matter how little they got paid, they were willing to do the work. This is a quote from Ryosuke Hirakimoto, who quit his job as an animator to work at a nursing home. Despite working in the industry for years, his pay never broke $38 a day. But with the aging population in Japan, there are way more incentives to work at nursing homes, so he made the switch. It's passion, Koani, an animator at Studio Yuraki, said, because there's not any returns from working. It's only because I really enjoy doing it. I just feel like I need to do it. Because when you see your show being broadcast and you know you worked on it, it's the greatest feeling ever. This might be a big question, but how do you think that we can improve the working conditions in Japan?
That's a big one. That's obviously a big one, but at the same time, everyone is asking themselves these questions. First, I think there is a thing that we have to look at as foreigners, working in the Japanese industry. This is not necessarily specifically our industry, so we should be very careful of not placing ourselves as here's what we have to do. Let us save the industry, as I've seen some people do, you know what I mean? So the first thing is to acknowledge that there won't be any change without our Japanese colleagues. And then I personally think that it comes from talking with all our colleagues, organizing the workplace, getting them to, maybe, and if you look at Japanese history, it's kind of ironic to say that, but work toward union-like movement in the workplace, discussing rates also. Like something that I specifically have been doing at Toei is work with Seisaku Shinkos and my kohai, people that are under me in terms of age and experience, and work to significantly increase their rate when they start, if that makes sense. So all these things are stuff that we can actually do as foreigners. It's not trying to be like, oh, let's change everything, you know, when again we are foreigners, but it's like discuss with all our colleagues to organize ourselves to get to a position where we all get a bit of a better pay, if that makes sense.
So, what advice would you give someone who, wants to be in your shoes and do anime like me?
I think having fun and like it's such a simple advice, but I genuinely think it's like one of the most powerful advice one could say. Oh, okay, I have two advice. One is have fun. Like do it because you genuinely enjoy the craft. The moment you don't enjoy it, stop, do something else. So like to get to have a good animation level, there is no secret. It's very much, of course, depending on the people. Sometimes there are people who get it faster, but overall, the more you do something, the more you see it, the more you see different stuff, the better you are going to naturally get. So by having fun, you're going to create kind of a virtuous circle where you're going to do something that amuses you, so you're going to want to do more. And because you're having fun, you're going to learn more. And because you're going to learn more, you're going to feel yourself improving. It's going to be more fun, and so and so. So that's the first kind of like brain dead advice I can give literally everyone, is try to always have fun. Remember why you're doing that at time when it gets hard. And the second advice is like have an online presence, and I say that especially as a foreigner, because like Seisaku Shinko and people who hire animators are very much online. So like try to build your online presence, try to have your work easy to see work, like demo reels, like compilation of your work, and try to always update it, if that makes sense. Like once you have a new animation, post it, and that way you will slowly but surely build up your overall how is it in English? I mean, the amount of people who can see it, that makes sense. But another advice I could say, sorry, I said I was just going to give one, I'm giving three.
It's okay.
But it's like Japan industry when you start is very, 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 very hard. I recommend as an animator starting to work in your home country, and on the side, time to time, you can accept small freelance for Japan, if that makes sense. That way, you will get the decent pay and rates of your home country, will also being able to, be protected by your family, friends, and such. And slowly, by doing like this small freelance for Japanese industry, you're going to build up your name. You're going to build up very much your demo reel as well. And when you want to do the shift, you will have already accumulated enough experience and money in your home country, if that makes sense. Like doing the instant shift and going 100% into the Japanese industry. For people who did it, people who do it, mad respect to you. But I think if you want to go the more healthy route, until you get enough experience in the Japanese industry, having a main work in the US or Europe or anywhere where the work conditions are a bit more healthy is what I would recommend.
So you don't have to, you can work remotely. You don't have to go to Japan to work in anime.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is, you don't even need, I would say, depending on the studio and the people, you don't even need to speak necessarily Japanese to work for anime. So it is very much a possibility for sure. Again, it all boils down to having an online presence and having work that can be easily seen and noticed by Seisai Kushinko's.
I can never forget that feeling he said. When you animate a still character on a page and you see them move, laugh, cry, get angry, that's the charm of animation. When I see my hand-drawn work shared and seen not just in my country but around the world, I feel happiness. That's a quote from CK, an animator and character designer from Japan. It's statements like that that assure me that this industry will never go anywhere. Despite all the suffering, there's still beauty within this work. There's still a core to be built upon and improved. It's not all hopeless. We as artists and animators simply want to recreate what it means to be alive, what it feels like to be human. This is such a profound feeling. There's nothing else like it. I remember seeing a Miyazaki quote about this very thing. He said, "Our work's main goal must be to tell children life is worth living." I think as a depressed child who questioned that very thing, Miyazaki saying that means so much to me. It's in moments like these that I remember all the shots from anime that gave me that reminder. Akida's transformation, Shoya risking his life to save Nishimiya, Luffy's heart becoming one with the drums of liberation, Ace realizing why he's alive in his last moments as he holds Luffy. I remember that, and that's all I need. But with the rise of AI, horrid working conditions, bad pay, it's hard to feel valued in this world as an artist. To these executives, we are purely numbers that can be replaced at any moment. That's why they don't renegotiate these percentages with the committees. They would rather hoard the little profits that they do get than rework the system so that it works for everyone. That's why they hire freelancers instead of offering stable jobs with benefits. Don't be misled though. Although this entire video was about anime in Japan, this is not a Japan exclusive issue. This is a capitalism issue. Artists in America, especially those who work in the entertainment industry, have had major fights in the past few years to win back the profits that were stolen from them, especially through the rise of streaming services. Capitalism and neoliberal politics encourage this behavior. It's an ideology that dictates working class people must suffer at the behest of capital owners and not dare become between them and their profits. They must sit quietly and suffer. We have been led astray and convinced that working class people do not deserve dignity for their labor. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. We have to remember that these companies will be nothing without us. They need our labor. If we stand together, we outnumber them. That's why strikes and unions work so well. Divided we beg, united we bargain. But after all of this investigation, what have I decided? Will I work in the anime industry or will I leave that dream behind? I still have a while to decide and I will take my time doing so. Researching and learning about all this, especially talking to Vincent, showed me a pathway in which I could do this and still hold on to my sanity. I really don't see a world where I don't at least try. I'm a bit too stubborn to work in solely, at least in the American industry, and hate what I'm doing because it has no meaning or soul. I mean, I got teary-eyed writing about my memories of the shots from different anime. Like, I love this genre. It keeps me going, so I really don't see another path. Anime is what animation should be. It is truly a labor of love, which you can see in the gorgeous backgrounds and illustrative food that manages to make your stomach growl. The storytelling, the movement, there's truly nothing like it. It has a soul that is irreplaceable. No matter if I choose to go into this industry or not, I'm more assured than ever that I will always love it, and the thousands of people who pour their blood, sweat, and tears into it. Fight for working class people, join a union, organize, speak out, and never take the anime you consume for granted again. My last question is just a fun question because I'm a big One Piece fan. But
Damn.
who is your favorite One Piece character? I might already know the answer to this, but and also what's your what's your favorite arc?
Oh, I mean, favorite arcs. I mean, it's not a surprise. It's like Enies Lobby. It's like Water 7. I mean,
Oh my god, that's my favorite.
what a
too.
surprise! Yeah, I mean, it's so good. It's so many people's favorite, honestly. Like, and a favorite character might be Kaido, and that's just because of how much I've drawn him. I'm the kind of people. I mean, all animators are to a certain extent, but the more we draw characters, the more we end up liking them a lot of the time. So I've drawn Kaido quite a bit. And plus, he's a dragon. Who doesn't like dragons?
What was the first One Piece episode you worked on? Because I'm in Wano right now, but I'm not sure if I've seen.
It was 957th one, directed by Megumi Ishitani-san.
Oh, I'm not there yet, but I've seen a lot of your clips. That's how I became a fan. Because I spoil One Piece. I probably shouldn't, but
Damn. I mean, I'm the kind of person who thinks that the way things are told is sometimes more important than what is being told. So I think if you're that kind of person who enjoy the way a story is told rather than just the story itself, then I think it should be fine.
I would like to once again thank Vincent Chansard for talking to me and agreeing to that interview. It genuinely made my week to conduct that interview, and I rarely get excited. Girl, I was jumping for joy afterwards. This is also such a fun video to make, from the interview to conceptualizing the idea, the arts and crafts I got to do with the board. When you make content and art you are genuinely proud of and genuinely had fun making, views, all this extra shit doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, I put my pussy, I put my heart and my soul into this, okay? That's what truly matters. If you're an artist, remember that. I want to give a shout out to my patrons, my Patreon members, my $10, my $1, my $5, all of you. I appreciate you all. You're real ones, real G's. I also would like to shout out my YouTube members. Really appreciate it. I will be updating those badges eventually, maybe during the summer. They really need to be updated. They don't work in dark mode because my stupid ass made the heart black. But nevertheless, it'll be cute and it'll be fixed. That's for sure. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Okay, bye.